Hi, it's been a pretty dark and gloomy day. Just waiting to make sure my stream comes up here, so I don't want to have to redo it again. You just never know. Here, let's see. Hopefully it's going back. There we go. Yep. Looks like I'm good. I use this software called Caster.io, and with that software I can stream to Facebook and YouTube at the same time, which is kind of cool. So here's the book, The Phoenix and the Falcon. I am reading a really good chapter. It's a pivotal chapter. Shall we say some of the tension is resolved? So I was conflicted as to whether, to stop or just read the whole thing. So I've had a fair amount of people following me, so it seems kind of mean to stop now. But I'm hoping that people buy the book or tell friends and, support me. If you know any, people that might make a movie out of it, just keep that in mind. Anyhow, of course, now I lost my page. Chapter 23. Enveloped by sunlight, Helena stepped out into a boisterous yet organized chaos. Involuntarily, her body recoiled from the throngs of men engrossed in multiple tasks. One was tending to his horse's hooves by anointing them with rare oils. Another carefully polished a glistening shield. A young man raced past them on his bay horse, which was, by Roman standards, hardly larger than a pony. His face was intent and focused on his goal. Women's voices were raised in a lively song as they washed and gathered water for the day. As each verse was completed, more than one woman laughed. Lena surmised that it was more than likely a bawdy tune, but she could not know for certain, as it was in Hunnic. Though she was safe, protected by Valamir, she could not deny the truth of her situation. She rode with Huns, the vermin of the Empire. Somehow the women did not affect her. But the sight of Hunnic warriors, with their myriad of facial tattoos and unnaturally shaped skulls, filled her with a visceral horror. Beyond her loathing, she was afraid, not for herself, but for Valamir. The image of him in battle, sword glinting and singing as he fought, flashed through her mind. She shivered at the thought of an enemy's blade finding his heart. Seeing Karachapan, Helena went to him and sought solace with his company. He acknowledged her with a smile. "I have something for you." Hobbling to the wagon, he extracted a pair of warm gloves. They were covered by a small piece of leather, square, folded neatly in half into a long triangle. Placing his presents in her hands, he was careful not to put much weight on her healing bones. She touched the gloves gently, admiring them. "They're beautiful," she said. Gretchen shrugged but looked pleased. "Open your gift, Helena." She gently unwrapped the leather and saw her other knife, the small, plain one. Freshly sharpened and retooled, its blade glistened in the sharp morning light. "You remembered," she said, tears in her eyes. "What troubles you, Helena, that a little kindness can make you cry?" She looked away. "I thought you'd forgotten." "Of course I didn't, but that's not what worries you." She hesitated. Her voice was barely audible. "I love a man who rides with killers and thieves." "Valamir has his own destiny," Karachapan said. "He'll be king of his tribe one day. I won't live to see the changes, but I sense them in the air. Attila, as mighty as he is, reaches for the stars, but they will burn him." "I love you as a father, Karachapan," Helena said, not understanding how the phrase could come so easily from her heart. "And I, you. In Valamir I have a son, and in you a daughter." "What is Thudamir?" Then she was appalled at her rudeness. "I'm sorry, I have no right to ask you such things." Karachapan only shook his head and answered her. "He struggles hard to be a man. Though I love him, he tries my patience. When he return, he'll not be happy to see that his father has a new child." "How do you know? I thought their father was old." "As old as I, but with eyes only for his new bride. She was pregnant when we left. But Valimir and Theudemir did not know. Oh, but surely Valimir is the eldest and heir. Kratapen shrugged his shoulders. Of course, but change can be hard. Lena changed the subject. She knew about the perils of change. Why does Valimir still call his brother by his childhood name? When they were children, Bevian was easier to say. It is his second name. He doesn't like his given name, so he actually prefers Bevian. I don't know why. Perhaps it is a habit. Theudemir has a noble sound. Poor Theudemir. He doesn't even like his name. She paused. But who knows if the child is still alive? She wondered aloud. At the village, many babies died young. At the thought, Helena pictured Mikhail. Her heart became a void, dark and imponderable. She squared her shoulders and studied the sky. How's your hand? Kratapen asked, sensing her grief. It doesn't hurt like before. I can move my fingers a little. Let me see it. With quiet efficiency, she slipped the knife under her belt, holding the gloves with her good hand. Kratapen unwrapped her bandages with expert gentleness and set aside the splint. Wiggle your fingers. Wincing, she obeyed. Your cut is all but healed, but its scab still holds tight. Your bones will need at least another 10 days. I'll save the splint, but we'll do without it for now. Slight, slow movements would be good, but be careful not to strain it. Her hand rested. Lena found that she could move it tentatively without pain. She watched Valimir as he smoothly dismantled the tents with Reese. Filling her eyes, he looked up with a smile. Her heart expanded with love, poignant yet bittersweet. But her fear remained, like ice, wintry and brisk. He wants me to bear his children, Kratapen, she said, her cheeks warm. They'd be beautiful, he said. I wonder what my grandfather would say. I'd hope he'd ask you to listen to your heart. His words eased her anxiety, softening the walls of her protective shell. I love him. My eyes drink in his presence, and I long for more, yet I remain afraid. Be his wife, Lena, and you'll find the happiness you deserve. Her voice was husky. You're my friend, Kratapen, she said, unable to say more. Shortly afterward, Valimir joined the silent duo, but with embarrassment and renewed shyness, Lena could not meet his eyes. He touched her cheek, encouraging her to look at him. As she blushed, his smile grew wide. His arms embraced her, and she softened at his touch. Cherishing his warmth, he chuckled. Why do you laugh, Valimir? Nothing, just that when you're here, my day is sweet. I could be with you for all time, she whispered. Behind his eyes, she glimpsed a flash of pain, gone so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. In its place was Valimir, adult and fully grown, with any ancient grief well hidden. You have my heart, Helena, he murmured in her ear. In the distance, men shouted. Valimir surveyed the camp with a professional glance. We're headed to the mountains, he said. The day will be short, as Attila commands. He rules the sun in the sky? Attila said with sarcasm, angry about the planned foray. Valimir narrowed his blue eyes. You've no right to judge him. Perhaps not, but his methods are not honorable. He flinched as if she had struck him. He looked away. I am what I am. She met his eyes, stricken. I just don't want you to be killed. He pulled her to his chest. I couldn't bear it, she added quietly. No one will touch me. Watch out for Grilia, she said. Bevian rides with me. In combat, he is loyal. Good, Lena said, feeling slightly relieved. I'm sorry to be a shrew on the day you could face a sword. Lifting her hair away from her face, he smiled. The twinkle in his eyes faded. But you're right. I find no honor in innocent blood. It gives me no pleasure, only disgust. You fulfill your obligations to Attila, but be careful. Valimir, you carry my heart. I will always come back to you, he said. I promise. Her stomach drummed with excitement, but her eyes studied the ground. He kissed her forehead, then her lips. Today you stay with Kratapen and Reese. They'll take care of you. She nodded, checking tears. Until tonight, then. He hugged her almost fiercely. Yes, my wife. As he leapt upon his son, she watched, not taking her eyes from him until he was lost in the crowd of converging men. He did not look back, which was just as well. She was so afraid for him, and did not want him to see it. She joined Kratapen a few horse lengths away. I'm riding past Yell today. Good, he said. They'll not have to ask Reese to change his tack. Lena shook her head incredulously. How do you know my mind? Looking mysterious, he shrugged. Well? She asked, needing to know. With mock exasperation, he looked up at the sky and then relented. I listen to my heart and pray to my Sarosh, the protector of my soul in this world. It tells me what to do. It's never wrong, but sometimes thoughts muffle my hearing. How do you know if it's from your spirit and not something else? She asked, thinking of the darkness that overwhelmed her whenever she saw Grelia. I watch my body, Karatban said. When I hear my heart, I feel calm and connected to all. But if I feel tense, impatient, or insistent on convincing others of my rightness, then the voice is from fear. It's not a mystery, just common sense. She nodded, but despaired, certain she would be unable to hold fast to the light in Agrilia's presence. Feeling hopeless, she began to believe that the curse was too potent for her to master alone. I'll never have your wisdom, Karatban. Give yourself another 40 years, he said, laughing. Now stop worrying and enjoy the day. Winter comes, chilling the earth, but the sun shines brightly. Reflect on how its light glorifies the one God instead of your imperfections. Yes, Karatban. Her tone was meek, like a child's, but her lips curved into a slight smile. His eyes sparkled at the shift in her mood. As the wagons headed north, guarded by at least 500 soldiers, the main body of the horsemen veered southwest. Riding alongside the wagon, Helena attempted to locate Valimir and the teeming attack force, but without success. Rhys rode beside her on a hunnock horse. His seat was firm, reflecting years of experience. He was taciturn and did not once glance in her direction. She respected his privacy. As they reached the foothills of the Urals, there was a subtle, fragrant aroma of trees in the air. Fall leaves rustled under the horses' hoofs, reminding Helena that it was autumn. Blocked by the sloping mountain ridge, the wind blew in sudden gusts, not with the same strength as on the open steppe. The sun was bright, the air was brisk. A scouting party, perhaps 30 horsemen, rode toward the wagon, shouting in Hunnic. The commander at the escort answered in an enthusiastic bellow, waving his arm to quicken the pace. Relieved, Helena recognized Ishiite, Valimir's friend. Valimir's friend led the wagons deeper into the hills and into a valley, alongside a stream meandering through its center. Helena noticed immediately that it was wide, open at both ends, and not conducive to an ambush. When Karatban and Rhys set up the tents, it was well past midday. As the three shared a meal, Helena fretted in silence. She longed to see Valimir, and the thought of how his serious face lit up with a smile. As best she could, with her one hand, she helped Karatban wash the dishes and was grateful for the distraction. Then there was nothing else to do. Because of her injury, she could not even sew or even write. Can you tell us the story, Karatban? She asked, something about times past. Rhys moved away, but looked surprised when Karatban gestured for him to return. You can learn a thing or two, young man. Listen and hear about the great King Xerxes, who has been much maligned by certain Greek historians. Her knees to her chest, Helena heard about the ancient Persian king, from a man who had remained loyal to his heritage, despite years spent with barbarians. Karatban's strong partisanship of the Persian viewpoint, so reminiscent of her grandfather, brought a smile to her lips. After Karatban had finished his tale, Helena could not resist teasing him. But if the Greeks were so pitiful and weak, how were they able to defeat this great son of Darius? Karatban grimaced with irritation, aptly suspecting that she provoked him. His answer was succinct. Luck. Plain and simple. Laughing, Helena went inside. Once in the tent, she felt restless. She was tired of the limits imposed by her incapacitated hand. The hours passed slowly, still there was no sign of the men. Helena had been in and out of the tent at least 100 times, scanning the horizon for a glimpse of them. Night fell, with no Valimir. Inside the servants' tent, Helena shared a meal with Karatban and Rhys. They were quiet, preoccupied with their own concerns. Each was dependent upon the Ostrogoth's survival. Finally, Helena broke the silence. Karatban, why do you think they've been so long? Attila, he said. He likes to play as he stalks his prey. Helena lost her appetite. The meal finished, Karatepen ordered Reese to walk Helena back to her tent. Do you think I need an escort for 20 paces? Yes. Oh, she said, suddenly afraid of sleeping alone. Inside you'll be safe. The traditions are strict about entering a tent uninvited. But here, take this, Karatepen said, handing her grandfather's sword. Valimir wanted you to have it. As aloof as ever, Reese walked beside her. She held the sheathed sword tightly, as if it were a magical talisman. At the entrance he turned to her. I'll not sleep until Valimir returns. If you cry out, I'll hear. Thank you, Reese, she said, but in the moonlight his face looked almost menacing. She wasted no time going inside. After tending to the fire, Helena rested, planning to await Valimir's return. Instead, she fell asleep, quickly swept into the kaleidoscope of roaring dreams. When a blast of frigid air rushed into the tent, Helena awoke. She sat up, her mind immediately clear, and saw Valimir. He looked tired and worn, his face haggard. In an instant, she was beside him, searching him for signs of injury. He stank of blood. Where are you hurt? She asked. Just a few scratches here and there, he said slowly, setting down his shield and sword. I'll get to Karatepen. No need, Helena. What about his son? Did Reese take care of him? Valimir nodded and gently took off his tunic. Except for his right shoulder, his woolen undergarment was free of blood. Feeling ill, Helena realized that the rest had not been his. Yet concern suppressed her revulsion. Let me see your shoulder, she said. He gave a small smile, as if too tired to resist her will. Sit down and rest, she said, angry as she realized that his scratch was significant. It needs Karatepen's poultices. Don't you know that? Her voice grew louder, edging toward hysteria. Shh, Helena, I've had much worse. He held her wrist and gently pulled her down to his lap. Close to him, her agitation dissipated, transforming into an unexpected excitement. Her world contracted, centering on his face and the warmth of his body. I was so worried about you, she whispered. See, I came back as I promised. He paused, as if considering whether to speak. His words, when they came, were slow. Each costed him dearly. If I could arrange safe passage for you to Constantinople, would that make a difference? She was startled by his question. What do you mean? I have an uncle who was in the Imperial Roman service. I might not be welcome in Constantinople, but he could guarantee your safety. Why do you ask me this? Lena asked, shaken by the thought that he wanted to rid himself of her. I don't want you to think that you have no other choice but me. I want your commitment for freedom, not fear. Are you sure that's the reason? What else could it be? She looked away, ashamed. What are you thinking? He asked. That you're tired of me. He laughed, shaking his head. Sometimes you're a foolish girl, Helena. He held her tightly. Don't you know that if you went back, you'd break my heart? Well, I'm not going, she said, flinging back her hair. His eyes were soft, echoing his smile. Will you be my bride? Yes, she whispered, but her throat was tight. He kissed her hard, pulled away. Wait, I can't come to you with the stench of battle on me. I should be clean. She held his arm. Don't leave, Valimir, she said, suddenly afraid. They left her to bathe in the creek he would never return. Stay, and let me sponge the dirt from you. His eyes were serious, studying her face, as if he saw her for the first time. I'd like that, Helena, very much. She filled a leather bowl from a bucket of water, spilling some of it, clumsy with only one hand. She didn't care. Nothing mattered except being close to him. Finding a clean cloth from her satchel, she dipped it into the water and began to wash his face, starting with his forehead, working her way down to his mouth and chin. The cloth turned brown with dust and grime. Opening the tent flap, she tossed out the old water and refilled the bowl. With a rinsed rag, she stroked his neck and drifted down to his shoulders and carefully cleaned the cut across his upper arm. The injury was not deep, she realized, relaxing her concern. It could wait until morning for proper bandaging. As she massaged his shoulders, bathing them with water, Lena explored the way his muscles merged together and how the fire illuminated the fine texture of his skin. She took her time, sponging him clean. When she moved to his front, her shyness returned. Touching his chest, Even through the barrier of a wet cloth, her cheeks were warm. The wound over his heart had all but healed, although some of the scab had torn away during the day, revealing a red scar. He followed the direction of her eyes, and not yet whole. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. It doesn't matter. She retreated to his back and loosened the grit from his hair with the wet cloth. She ran her fingers through it, untangling the thick, blonde strands. He sat quietly, giving himself to her care. With another cloth, she patted him dry, leaving his hair damp but not dripping. She stood before him, feeling awkward, not knowing what to do. He watched her, his bright eyes alive in the firelight. Would you put on the dress that you wore for our wedding? Her cheeks were hot. Only if you don't watch. Pointedly, he turned his back and faced the wall. As she searched her satchel, her hands were trembling, nervous from old fears. Despite her intentions, her heart beat with panic. Finding the dress, she smoothed it with her good hand and found comfort in its soft texture. It reminded her of home, of Constantinople. She took off her traveling clothes and pulled on the dress. I'm ready, she said, but knew she lied. Standing, he turned with the grace of a cat. His smile was deep and possessive, yet he did not approach her. You're beautiful, he said, extending his hand, stepping closer, not moving until she reached for him. You're shaking. He pulled her to his bare chest and stroked her neck, then her face. I won't hurt you, he whispered. She wanted to believe him, but her body remembered the past and tensed. He lifted her in his arms, carrying her to his bed. They lay side by side, but he did no more than hold her. Wrapped in the familiar comfort of his arms, she began to relax. His hand lifted her hair away, and he kissed her neck. Chills of excitement swept her spine. As his lips found hers, she churned with feeling. Her trembling ceased, replaced by an inner urgency. His hands and mouth explored her, and she was too overwhelmed to feel self-conscious. She had no time for her thoughts or doubts, only the present. Vladimir removed her dress, leaving her chemise. His fingers loosened the ribbons on her bodice and caressed her breasts, making the tips harden. Sliding down her undergarments, he unbuckled his belt. Naked next to her bare skin, he kissed her, his lips pressing hers, and his hand stroked her between his eyes. She moaned with pleasure. I love you, Helena, he whispered into her ear. She clung to him, wanting to be his. The pain of her past was forgotten, as if it had never been. Then he was inside her, their hips moving rhythmically as one. Her body was inundated by sweet intensity. She whispered his name, barely able to speak. As he consummated his passion, she was swept once more with pulsing, exquisite sensations. When it was over, she felt shy. He smiled. His eyes were enormous, close to hers. You are my wife, Helena, for all time. She touched his face. When I first saw you, I loved you, but I did not know it. So much has happened, but you are my heart, my love, and my life. His embrace was fierce. Helena, will you give yourself to me again? Yes, she said, laughing. Afterward, as they lay together, she felt so drowsy that she could not move. He covered them with a blanket. Intertwined, they fell into a dreamless sleep. So that's chapter 23. So Helena finds love. I think something good happens to her. Anyway, I'll see you next week, and have a good week. Take care.